Hey, my name is Amoga, co-founder and CEO of Carbon Origins. We're a robotics and VR company on a mission to make robots commonplace. So we're a group of scientists, engineers, and entrepreneurs. We have landed robots on Mars, we've launched suborbital rockets, we've deployed satellite constellations, developed VR technologies for Disney. We're very passionate about deep tech, and we see robotics as the future of front-end labor. And our goal is to incubate that in a location, in a place where it can get the most TLC. We originally started the company in California, but we moved to Minnesota a few months ago. Really affordable to build robots in the United States here in Minnesota. There are a lot of contract manufacturers here with the right expertise. There are other companies building robots here. It is going to be the hotbed for robot manufacturing. The reason is, if we can build Skippies, our robots, to work in the Minnesota weather and geography, they can work anywhere.
Now, when you hire someone with a disability, you've immediately led by example. You've said you trust a new perspective, that you're confident in that person, in yourself, and your team. Now, I work with a theater company, and we have signs on the wall that say, "Work your quirk," and radical inclusion. They emphasize that what makes us different gives us strength, a new perspective, a creative edge. In Cajun cooking, there's an ingredient called the lagniappe, and it's that little something something that keeps you coming back. Hire somebody with a disability. It's the lagniappe thing to do.
So, you've decided to start your own business. You have the resources to sell or the services your new customers need. So what's next? Here's a simple checklist to help you get started. First, choose your business structure. Do you want a sole proprietorship, partnership, limited liability company, or corporation? Each form has tax and financial consequences. Next, check to make sure the name you want to use for your business is available. You can do this by checking with the Minnesota Secretary of State office. If you want to be a sole proprietor, all you have to do is register the business name with the Secretary of State office. Or if your business is going to be an LLC or a corporation, when you file the business structure registration with the Secretary of State's office, that registration also includes the business name. After that, you may need to obtain federal and state tax identification numbers from the Internal Revenue Service and the Minnesota Department of Revenue. Note that some businesses won't need to take this step. Need is determined by the number of business owners, if the business will have employees, and if the business makes taxable sales or provides taxable services. Next, obtain any necessary licenses and permits from state and local government. Then you will need to buy or rent space for the business and set up phone and internet service. You'll also want to start a banking and credit relationship with a bank or other financial institution. And don't forget to write a business plan with benchmarks to guide you through business growth. We can help you.
And remember, if you need help in any of these steps, please reach out to us here at the Small Business Assistance Office. We have staff available to answer your questions.
My name is John Hauk. I am president of LightRun Incorporated. LightRun manufactures and sells a specialized unweighting tool for survivors of stroke, traumatic brain injury, and other injuries. I started out my career working for a company called Cardiac Pacemakers, then later on St. Jude Medical, along with a couple of startups in between. So I came out of the cardiac world, and Minnesota has been a great place for a medical device career. Our product has been sold and is currently being used in Hennepin County Medical Center, the VA Hospital in Minneapolis, North Memorial Hospital, and we're soon going to be delivering a system to Courage Kenny. So we are getting local traction in spite of the pandemic, and our goal is to go nationwide in 2022 and beyond.
Well, I met Andrew in 2010. He was a recent graduate from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. So he already had his education before he came to us. And he was looking for work as an architect.
And I applied for over 200 jobs all over the U.S. I applied for jobs in Hawaii, New York, Florida, and didn't get any sort of response. And after I'd applied for all of those different jobs, I realized that the job market right now is really low and that I was facing discrimination, as were a lot of people with disabilities.
So he's deaf and the world is hearing, and so of course the biggest barrier for him was communication. He worked with MCIL on job interviewing skills, and he did a very nice job talking about his experience and his work qualifications, but he did struggle a little bit with the accommodation issue, and so we worked a little bit more on that.
It was my good fortune to meet Andrew back in 2007, 2008. Andrew was someone who was deaf and he had graduated from architectural school. Really my charge was, how can I help Andrew network, take smaller steps given what the economy was.
He really advocated in my job search. He wants people to get out there. He connected me with people in the field because that's what I needed. He reached out to MnDOT, the Minnesota Department of Transportation, in the Affirmative Action Office. He contacted Lynette Geschwind. She was the head of the Affirmative Action Office at MnDOT. And she was able to set up a contract job for me to inspect airport terminals. It was a fascinating job, but again, it was contract work. And they actually didn't seem to see me as a person with disabilities. Based on my resume, they said via email that they were just really impressed with my experience, and they wanted to give me a chance.
When we launched Andrew, we were not focused on his disability. We helped him develop the skills to market himself as an architect. No one with a disability gets a job because of their disability. It's all about skills, and Andrew's a perfect example of someone that took what we helped him learn and was able to independently get a job in the private sector.
Do you run a small business in Minnesota? Are you trying to expand your operations? Or need help adjusting to changes brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic? Then contact your local Small Business Development Center.
We'd like you to know that whether you're starting a brand new business, growing an existing one, or if your business needs help because of the COVID pandemic, the SBDC can provide that help, and it won't cost you a penny.
These are hard times, but if you need help with your business, Small Business Development Centers have real professionals standing by, ready to help you develop your business plan, do marketing and research, set up your accounting, gain access to capital, and much more. And they do it all for free. So contact us today at mnsbdc.com.
In Minnesota, we're training our workforce for the next chapter of the global economy.
Can't wait to get started on this project.
It's great hands-on practice.
I think our students will love it.
I'll bring this to the robotics lab.
Our education and business climate are among the best in the nation. And they work together to grow creative, high-skilled talent.
Parts can we make with this machine? The possibilities are almost endless.
We're a state that works hard, boasting one of the highest participation rates in America's workforce.
Awesome, man. This looks great. We can really do anything here.
Great things are happening in Minnesota, and we can help you thrive.
Final touch, man. Checkmate.
Join us.
Hi, my name is Amoga, co-founder and CEO of Carbon Origins. We're a robotics and VR company on a mission to make robots commonplace. So we're a group of scientists, engineers, and entrepreneurs. We have landed robots on Mars, we've launched suborbital rockets, we've deployed satellite constellations, developed VR technologies for Disney. We're very passionate about deep tech, and we see robotics as the future of front-end labor. And our goal is to incubate that in a location, in a place where it can get the most TLC. We originally started the company in California, but we moved to Minnesota a few months ago. Really affordable to build robots in the United States here in Minnesota. There are a lot of contract manufacturers here with the right expertise. There are other companies building robots here. It is going to be the hotbed for robot manufacturing. The reason is, if you can build Skippies, our robots, to work in the Minnesota weather and geography, they can work anywhere.
Now, when you hire someone with a disability, you've immediately led by example. You've said you trust a new perspective, that you're confident in that person, in yourself, and your team. Now, I work with a theater company, and we have signs on the wall that say, "Work your quirk," and radical inclusion. They emphasize that what makes us different gives us strength, a new perspective, a creative edge. In Cajun cooking, there's an ingredient called the lagniappe, and it's that little something something that keeps you coming back. Hire somebody with a disability. It's the lagniappe thing to do.
So, you've decided to start your own business.
Great. Thanks, Eric. Good morning, everyone. I'm Alicia, Communications Director at Deeds. So happy to have all the press on the call with us this morning. Just a couple of housekeeping items. Please, someone in the background, please keep your phones or computers muted to mitigate any echoes. We'll be happy to take your calls after a brief presentation. You can use the raise hand function, or you can just put your questions in the chat. So with that, I'll turn it over to Deed Commissioner Steve Grove. Over to you, Commissioner.
Thanks, Alicia. Good to see you all. Steve Grove here, Commissioner of Deed. Actually coming to you from our brand new headquarters in downtown St. Paul. We have officially now moved a few blocks away from our First National Bank headquarters. We're here at the Great Northern Building, getting settled in, like many folks, transitioning to being back in person, and excited for this new space, and excited to invite many of you to come join us here in the next few months as we unpack our boxes and welcome the public and the press and others to come check out our new digs. We're excited for it. Thrilled to be together with you all today to talk about our July jobs report here, of course, with our Interim Director of Labor Market Information, Oriane Casal. And if you had a chance to check out the press release, which I think is just momentarily being published if it hasn't yet already, you'll see that once again, Minnesota has held steady at a record-setting 1.8% unemployment rate. This is again, the lowest unemployment rate ever reported by any state in the history of our country, certainly at least in the history of that metric being measured by the BLS. So we are remaining a nation-leading market for job accessibility, and also just the opportunity for job seekers in Minnesota. We also saw this last month, a big month for job growth. We grew about 19,000 jobs, a little bit over. It's a 0.7% uptick in July, and we were happy to see as well that June number, which many of you will recall was flat previously, has now been revised upward by 900 jobs. So This 0.7% uptick in jobs in July is more than twice the rate that the country grew in July. The country, as you may remember, added about 528,000 jobs, and I think grew by about 0.3% overall. So Minnesota did outpace the country last month. For those here who follow Minnesota's numbers regularly, you know that there's a lot of up and downs in this current economic environment. And so we've begun to look more specifically at 3-month stretches for job growth to get a sense for just how well are we doing. If we average this out over 3 months, what do the trend lines look like? And when you look at that, you find that we are roughly matching the nation's job growth rate overall. We're at about 0.3% increase per month. I think that's a good thing when you average it out over 3-month increments. This month in particular, we saw big gains in construction and manufacturing. Oriana will get into those details a little bit later. And government actually finally picked up jobs, about 4,500 to be exact. So some good job growth this last month in July. And again, that record-setting 1.8% unemployment market, it really means we have a tight labor market in our state. There's lots of opportunity, but we have the second tightest labor market in the entire country. And I'll say, just having been across the state a lot over the past few months in our Summer of Jobs tour, talking to employers and job seekers, really in all corners of the state, this tight labor market is being felt by everyone. Workers have extraordinary amounts of choice in Minnesota, incredible job opportunities to take advantage of. There's, of course, some inefficiencies in businesses being able to find the right labor and the skill sets matching up. But increasingly, we're seeing employers really shift how they think about training folks on the job, changing their perception of what a good candidate coming in the door looks like, and doing some really unique things to help sign people up. We were just up yesterday in Thief River Falls. Arctic had up there doing great work, but down a lot of workers. They said they could hire 150 workers tomorrow, and they offer a $4,000 signing bonus upon joining their team. So these are the kinds of things we're seeing employers do across the state in an incredibly tight labor market. And we see that, really in all parts of Minnesota. We did see our labor force participation rate this last month tick down a tenth of a percentage point. And we saw our labor force decrease by a few thousand folks. You'll see more detail on that in the release. Again, it's a little confusing. I always ask our economists this question every time that happens, where you have job growth, but also people leaving the labor force. Part of that is due really to the fact that there are two different surveys that the federal government does to measure those metrics. So it can be a little bit confusing, but I think the big picture is we are seeing people continue to move into employment. We're at record lows of people that are getting unemployment insurance benefits from our department, as well as those weekly benefit requests go down and down and down, and people get into jobs across Minnesota. We did see, thankfully, the slight reversal of the trend that we had seen with the Black unemployment rate in our state, which, as we have highlighted over the past few months, has been increasing. That finally dropped by a tenth of a point. Again, not much, but on a 12-month rolling average, it has gone down. We know as a state that these racial wealth gaps are central to our ability to grow our economy. And what we're doing as an agency there, with the 5 commitments that we've shared with all of you, focused on directing dollars towards targeted populations, revamping how we construct our grant programs and our outreach, is a key part of that equation. And there's a lot of other efforts happening in our economy as well. But it was good, at least in this month, to see that rate not continue to go up, but actually continue to go down, because, as we've mentioned, the labor force participation rate amongst people of color in our state is going up. And so we know there are willing workers out there, and our Summer of Jobs campaign is trying to make some of those connections. Again, by industry, construction was up over 1,000 jobs. Manufacturing is going gangbusters in Minnesota over the last year, up over 1,000 jobs. We're seeing just huge growth in advanced manufacturing across the state, and a lot of new automation. We're seeing a lot more grants that we're making to companies that are willing and excited to automate. As we've discussed here before, this idea that the robots are coming to take our jobs is really now turned to a conversation about how many robots can we get and how quickly can we get them to make our jobs more attractive to workers and to increase productivity at a time when that has flagged nationally. So you see a lot of that activity happening here in our state. We are now, big picture, about 85% of the way back to regaining the jobs that were lost during the pandemic. 417,000 were lost during the pandemic. We're back about 356,000. So we're on our way there. And just a couple of the trends to point out before we turn over to Oriana for some further detail is, of course, inflation remains a major concern of our nation, and that is very true in our state as well, as we see that our over the year hourly earnings are up 5.6%, but inflation is up 8.5%. So wage growth continues to not keep up with inflation. There are certain occupations for which wage growth has been stronger. Nursing and residential care is up 13% over the year, for example. That is attacking long-standing artificially low wages in some of those industries, particularly for personal care aides. So we're glad to see some of that growth happening. And then we continue to look at the racial demographic data, which you'll see broken out in the report, but we are seeing a slight reversal of some of those trends that we wanted to point out here too. So I think with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Oriana Casal, who will give some further detail, and then looking forward to answering your questions. Oriana, over to you.
Thank you. There we go. So as the commissioner said, Minnesota's job growth picked up steam again in July with the addition of 19,100 jobs. 14,600 of those were in the private sector. The unemployment rate held steady at that record low 1.8%. We don't have state rankings for this month yet, but as of June, that was an all-time record low. While the labor force growth took a pause this month with the loss of 4,000 people from both employed and unemployed, Minnesota added labor force participants in every month since December 2021. The size of the labor force is now 62,972 people larger than in January 2022. So over the year to date, we're up almost 63,000 in the labor force. That is a 1.4% growth compared to the nation at 0.2%. So we're definitely holding our own with labor force growth, although there was a bit of a pause in July. So in terms of labor force participation rates by race, last month we reported that the Black labor force participation rate was higher than white labor force participation rate in Minnesota, but it did drop on a 12-month moving average basis and is now somewhat lower at 68.1% compared to 68.5% for white Minnesotans. But to put that in context, the labor force participation rate for white Minnesotans has been dropping throughout the pandemic period, largely due to the aging workforce in that demographic. Hispanic Minnesotans still have the highest labor force participation rate, now at 80%. That is a very high labor force participation rate. If you look nationally, that I haven't compared this across the board, but it's got to be one of the highest in the country. You can advance the slide. Unemployment rates by race. The unemployment rate ticked down for Black workers to 7.3%. It remained level for white workers at 2.4%, and it ticked up for Hispanic workers at 3.2% in July, and this is all based on that 12-month moving average, rolling together 12 months. And then you can advance the slide again. So comparing men and women's unemployment rate and labor force participation, this is kind of a complicated slide, but what it does is it looks at the difference, the change in labor force participation in July 2022 compared to February 2020. And then that's the blue bar, and then the green bar is just the unemployment rate. So women's unemployment rate in Minnesota continued to drop in July to 2.7%, now below that of men's, which remained at 3.2% on a 12-month moving average basis in July. Women's labor force participation continued to slide down to 64% in this month, while men's labor force participation increased to 73.1%. So we're seeing that disparity beginning to grow a little bit in 2022. Prior to the pandemic in February 2020, Minnesota were at 66.2%. So that's 2 2/10 of a point above where we are now. And then men were at 73.9%, which is only 0.8 of a point above where we are now. So you're beginning to see that gap in labor force participation. That didn't show up right away in Minnesota. And so we're kind of really just beginning to see it now. You can advance the slide. So this is the over the year employment change by sector in jobs. So we added 78,519 jobs over the year in July. That's a growth of 2.7%, with the private sector up 77,854 jobs, or 3.1%. 9 of 11 super sectors posted positive over the year employment growth, with construction flat. Manufacturing, trade, transportation, and utilities, information, financial activities, professional and business services, education and health services, leisure and hospitality, other services, and government all posted growth. And just to look at the slide for a second, the blue bar is Minnesota's over the year growth, and the green bar is a comparison to the US. So just pulling out some of those super sector industries, over the year growth was strongest in leisure and hospitality. It was up 9%, with the addition of 23,029 jobs. Arts, entertainment, and recreation grew 17.9%. That was an addition of just over 8,000 jobs, and accommodation and food services grew 7.1%, with an addition of almost 15,000 jobs. Manufacturing is really doing very well in Minnesota. It was the second fastest growing in super sector over the year. It added 17,400 jobs, up 5.5%. All published sectors showed growth. Non-durable goods grew 5%, adding 5,700 jobs, and durable goods grew 5.7%, adding 11,700 jobs. And as you can see from the bar graph, Minnesota manufacturing employment continued to be stronger than the nation over the year. And professional and business services grew 4.9%, with the addition of 18,664 jobs. Professional, scientific, and technical services, so the professional business services is split into three main industries. Professional, scientific, and technical services led growth, up 6.4%, followed by administrative and support and waste management, which was up 5.1%. That sector includes employment services, or temp help, which was up 6.3%, with the addition of 3,500 jobs. And then management of companies, which had been losing jobs over the year, has now gained 1,700 jobs for 1.9% growth over the year. Mining and logging lost 224 jobs in July, down 3.3%, and we had seen flat growth in that sector up till July for a couple months. And you can advance the slide. So this is the seasonally adjusted data here. Minnesota lost 417,600 jobs during the pandemic recession. That was just a 3-month period in early 2020, from February to April. And has since regained, so since April, has regained 356,900 of those jobs as of July 2022. That's 85% of the jobs that were lost during the pandemic recession. The private sector has regained 89% of the jobs lost. That's 345,300 jobs. As of July, you probably heard this in the news, the US has regained all of the jobs that it's lost during the pandemic recession. So looking by industry, construction, professional, scientific, and technical services, and manufacturing have more than regained the jobs lost in February, since February 2020, so during that 3-month time period. And those are the green bars on the right-hand side of the axis. State and federal governments, mining and logging and financial activities have continued to lose jobs over this period. So they've not grown at all by this seasonally adjusted measure. And of those most impacted by the recession, other services has regained 86% of the jobs that it lost. Accommodations and food services has regained 84%. Arts, entertainment, and recreation has regained 87% of the jobs that were lost during the recession. And you can advance the slide. So wages and inflation. Wages for many years were not very interesting to talk about because they didn't move very much and neither did inflation, but all of a sudden both wages and inflation are rising very, very fast. Wages in Minnesota in July over the year rose 5.6% for all non-farm jobs. So all these jobs that we're measuring. And 5.3% in the United States. So this is an over the year measure in July. But all of that growth was eaten up by inflation, which rose 8.5% over the year in July. So this bar graph stacks 2021 and 2022 over the year July wage growth. And you can see that even with strong gains in both years, inflation is still growing faster than wages overall. A few industries, though, you'll see. So I'll just point out a couple more things about this graph. The far left-hand bar is Minnesota total private employment. The far right-hand bar is the inflation indicator, the CPI. And the bar next to it to the left is all U.S. private sector jobs. So the comparison to Minnesota, all private sector jobs. And then the bars in between are industries in Minnesota. So looking at those industries, food services and drinking places is up 6.2% over the year and 18% over 2 years. And that industry wages are over a 2-year period are beating inflation. Construction also is beating inflation. It was up 8% over 1 year and 14% over 2 years. And nursing and residential care is also now beating inflation. It was up 13% over 1 year and 14.2% combined over 2 years. So other industries, though, are not seeing wage growth that's beating inflation in July. And then the last slide just compares the trend in wage growth between Minnesota and the U.S. Minnesota wages are now overall at $34.43 an hour on average, and the U.S. is at $32.11 an hour. And I think we're going to open it up for questions now.
Let's open the floor, and if you can use the hand raising feature here in Teams, that'd be great, and we'll take your questions. Kavita, we'll start with you.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. Would love to hear your thoughts on what might have happened between June and July. I mean, in June, it seemed like the low unemployment rate and the tight labor market was really depressing job growth. There was, even with an upwardly revised 1,000 jobs. And now in July, we had this blockbuster 19,000 jobs. So what do you think changed? Do you think it was the jump in wages, or what do you think? I don't know. How are you guys reading this?
Orion can speak to this too. I will just offer in the broad sense that, we have never stopped hearing that employers are trying to hire people. And I think they clearly had more success in July than in June. But I'll also take the broader view here that there's a reason we're starting to stress these 3-month averages. I think some of the data can get a little hoppy here. And so, we're thrilled by the 19,000 job growth in July. But looking at that kind of 3-month stretch starts to feel like a better view of where we're at than just every month looking at sort of the zigs and the zags. I think a lot of folks looking at BLS data in other states are thinking similarly. So, but Orion, why don't I turn it to you for some further thoughts here?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. It's definitely useful to look at a slightly longer time period than just 1 month, which is why we've been publishing those 3-month moving averages.
Theo, we've got a question from you, please. Go ahead and unmute.
Hi, yes, a couple things. First of all, if we can drill down on that one a little bit more. Why is it that we're seeing these, I think you called them in your news conference, lumpy numbers from one to the next month? And then secondly, are you hearing any slowdown? I mean, that's the talk nationally. When are we going to see a slowdown in hiring? Are you seeing that slowdown?
Two good questions. Maybe I'll answer the second one, and Orion, you may have some further data on the lumpiness question, which is a good one. You're seeing areas, of course, where hiring is picking up or slowing down, but some of it is just tracking how that naturally cycles in an economy. I mean, you look at Best Buy's announcement earlier of laying off some of their retail salespeople. That was, I think, less a function of outlook and more a function of changing model of how they sell electronics, right? And so you are seeing different companies pursue different hiring strategies, but I'll tell you, I don't have a lot of CEOs calling me up and saying, boy, I'm going to stop hiring people right now. I think CEOs are still hiring. Companies are still desperate for workers. And you see that as evidenced both in the job growth that's been successful, but also in the fact that we do have the second tightest labor market in the country. So, we're watching this closely. I think everyone is, examining what the Fed's actions are going to do to our economy here in Minnesota. We have a diverse economy, but I think labor has been so tight for so long in our state and so prized that I do think that companies are reticent to sort of let folks go if things change soon and things get better, because they might have the workers they need in the future. It's just labor is such a prized asset right now at any given firm that it's hard, I think, for firms to think about slowing down or letting folks go, even if maybe their projections are different. I mean, these things are all in concert, right? The supply chain challenges we've had here are affecting hiring as well. If you don't have the supplies and the manufacturing outfit to make sure that your workers can continue to progress, you have some productivity issues there. I'll also just say that I'm hearing more and more, even over the past few months, an enormous shift in focus on automation. I can't stress that enough. I mean, every business that I meet with is finding new ways to get things done, whether it's picking up the trash or building a snowmobile. They're finding ways to do that with robots that humans couldn't do before. And I think you've seen that nationally too, with a number of robot purchases going way up over the last few quarters. So, I do think there's other productivity solutions being looked at. We saw, of course, I think it was last week, that the U.S.'s broader productivity numbers took a bit of a sag. We're monitoring that closely here too, but we're still feeling a hot job market. Orion, do you want to answer Theo's question on the lumpiness of some of these jobs numbers any further than we maybe did for Kavita?
Yeah, just a couple thoughts on that. Prior to this, COVID was really impacting hiring. So the winter uptick in COVID probably suppressed hiring. So there was a lot, I mean, you can keep tracing that back. There was a lot of lumpiness due to factors, kind of external factors related to the virus. That is having some effect on our ability to do a very good seasonal adjustment on our data. And that may be now because we saw that huge downward swing in jobs in 2020, which we've never seen such a dramatic drop before, and then the huge upswing, and then the lumpiness after that. It's having some ability, it's presenting some challenges in seasonally adjusting these numbers going forward. So some of the lumpiness may be from that. Some of the lumpiness is just due to the challenges that employers have with hiring, and some of those other seasonal factors that don't fall always in the same month in Minnesota. Minnesota is a very seasonal economy, so you do get some of those swings despite a seasonal adjustment.
Okay, thank you. That's really helpful perspective.
Thanks, Ariane. Lauren, thanks for joining us. Over to you for a question, please.
Hi, yeah. I'm Lauren from the Washington Post. I haven't been to one of these before, but I am wondering, just sort of like on a national level, like why do you think Minnesota has the lowest unemployment rate of that any state has ever recorded right now? Like, is there something different about the workforce? Is there something different about the recovery or about the sort of demand right now for workers? And then my second question is, you mentioned a few industries where the labor market is really tight, like construction and nursing. Are there parts of this, or sorry, manufacturing, nursing, leisure and hospitality, construction, are there like parts of Minnesota? I was just looking at like a map and it seemed like unemployment is extremely low in like Rochester and Mankato. Are there reasons why it's so low in those particular areas? And does that have to do with the industries that are there? Sorry, that was a lot.
Yeah, no, so both kind of a big picture question, a more regional question. So, big picture, there's a lot of things that I think stand out about Minnesota. We have had traditionally one of the highest labor force participation rates in the country. That remains the case. People here do work hard, they show up. We've invested a lot in talent over the years. I think that it's a very diverse economy, and so we tend to weather pandemics and other major events a little bit more strongly than other states because we've got a lot of different industries here. We've got a lot of opportunity in our economy. We have the highest density of Fortune 500s of any state in the country. So we've got a good mixture of both big kind of blue chip companies, but also a thriving and growing startup ecosystem that I think is really unique and probably often overlooked by those who don't know much about Minnesota. It's an incredibly great place to live, as a state, and those metrics bear themselves out in all kinds of livability indexes and national rankings and things. So it's an attractive market to live in. On the other hand, we face some real demographic challenges. We have an aging population, slightly more than the rest of the country. We do face racial wealth gaps that are pretty stark and that we think are one of the biggest impediments to us growing. And so that kind of lack of incoming talent that we know is necessary to grow our economy, combined with a lot of opportunity and growth, just leads to a really tight market. And a lot of other factors that go behind that, and happy to dig deeper on them with you if that's helpful. Regionally, you're right that sectors of the economy, and you mentioned Rochester and Mankato, that are heavy on either manufacturing or healthcare, just have some of the tightest markets because there's such demand in those industries for jobs. And so I think that's why you see some regional differences here. But because of course Rochester is a big healthcare center, Mankato a lot of manufacturing. But Orion, you may have some thoughts here to add too on the regional piece.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Rochester is very heavy in healthcare. Mankato is manufacturing. Both those industries are really in hiring mode right now.
We can probably take one more question, and then we do have to hop, but we can always follow up individually with reporters. So who hasn't had a chance yet? Maybe Ethan will go to you, and then the others whose hands are still up, we can answer those offline.
Sure, yeah, that'd be great. Thanks. I'm just curious. I might have mentioned this in a previous call, but I keep going back to the 85% of jobs that were lost in the first 2 months. That doesn't seem like a big concern for you guys. Is that concerning, or is that something to note? Like, why are we at 85% when the nation is at 100%?
Orion, did you want to offer a comment?
Well, to put that in perspective, so 85%, we've regained 85% of the jobs lost. We're actually back to 98% of where we were in February 2020. Does that make sense? So it's the 85% of those jobs lost versus 2% of all jobs. Okay, so just to clarify that. So why are we not back to 100% is your question?
I mean, I think, again, it sounds different when you think about it being 98%, 85. I mean, because I think essentially we are, but I think the concern is more that we need more talent to move to Minnesota. We need to take advantage of our labor market that's here more effectively. And we've got pockets of our labor market that aren't seeing the kind of opportunity or connecting to jobs as effectively as they could. And I think, there's a study that McKinsey put out a couple of days ago that was led by a local McKinsey leader, Quillian Ellengroot. I think it's worth reading. That what we're hearing from from folks in labor force is that geography and skills gaps are some of the biggest things that are preventing the connection. So you never have a perfect labor market. People can't drive forever to get to a job, so that's a factor. And then there's this great moment that everyone stepped back and said, what's a good job in today's economy, that has caused a lot of workers to think about new industries, but they might not quite yet have the skills. And even if the employer doesn't require them to have the skills they might have traditionally required, there's just some friction in that whole interaction, right? And that's kind of what we're trying to do as state government. We're not going to be the ones that grow the economy, the businesses are, but we need to be out there making those connections between those pockets of labor and those employers that are demanding workers to make sure that there's no myth around what's needed in a worker, and no uncertainty about the training opportunities that are actually quite plentiful in our state to get from point A to point B, many of them requiring weeks, if not months of education, certainly not years or a degree. So this is the sector of the labor market that we're most focused on. You'll see that as we inflect into September with Workforce Development Month. And it's those efficiencies that they get really heightened when the labor market's this tight, because everybody knows there's opportunity here, and the fact that workers and businesses aren't connecting at the rate that we all want them to be is where I think the state really needs to aggressively focus. So we'll wrap there. I see more hands up, but we can take questions. Please reach out to Alicia Cortez Mayo with further questions beyond this. And thanks for joining us for this half-hour conversation, and more to come. Thanks, everybody.